Amen. So what have we been covering so far? The rearing of the temple, and we were looking at Solomon's temple. And what did we glean? What were we learning from the illustration of Solomon's temple? My brother says Solomon lays the foundation, right? And he also completes the temple. Someone else tell me, what does that mean for our time, right? That is a development that we see. Solomon lays the foundation of the temple, and he also finishes the temple. What does that mean for us?
The temple is built and finished in the time of the second angel.
The temple is built and finished in the time of the second angel. Someone else elaborate on that. What does that mean?
Solomon is the second angel who comes at 9/11. The dispensation that we made, so the temple has to be there for 9/11.
Okay, so when we say the temple is to be built from, the temple is to be built from 9/11, between 9/11 and midnight. I'm saying, what does that mean? Organization, right? That there's a process of organization that is taking place from 9/11 to midnight. Okay. What else does that mean? How else have we illustrated the temple? So you already spoke. How else do we illustrate the temple? I'm not saying you can't speak, but so let's hear other people. Personally, I'm of the perspective that it's better to learn little and understand the little we learn than to go through a lot of interesting material and glean little from it. So I'd like to engage you. Let's see how much we've gained from what we've covered so far. How else have we illustrated the temple? As in, what else does the temple teach, the building of the temple teach? We've spoken about a process of organization that is marked from 9/11 to between 9/11 and midnight, but that we can really mark as beginning where? If we really want to identify the beginning of this process, where does it really begin? 1989? Why? No, you got the right answer. Why? And it doesn't have to be my answer. What do you think? The time of the end when? You're correct so far? The messages began to be put in place? Okay, and what do those messages do? They become a body of messages, a system of truth? Okay. Alright, so she's correct so far. Who wants to help her? She says at the time of the end, messages are given, and they form a body of messages, they form a system of truth. But what does that system of truth do? What does that system of truth do? Ezekiel 37 is a clue. Begins the process of gathering. Yes, what does it gather? You begin to see a body of people that is being gathered, right? And what happens with this body of people subsequently at 9/11? They become alive and they're raised up a mighty army. So when you look at an army, what does an army look like? By what does an army characterize?
Order.
Order, strict organization, discipline, right? So 9/11, you see a living army being raised up. An army is disciplined, organized, right? Characterized by strict organization, but you can identify that process of gathering together that body of people that is organized as an army. You can mark it as beginning right at the time of the end. When the message is unsealed, that begins to do that work. Are you following? That's what we've covered so far. What else does the rearing of the temple teach us? Organization, beginning at the time of the end. The development of a message. Did we not cover that? Alright. Someone elaborate on that. What do we mean when we're identifying the development of a message?
Like Christ compares himself with a temple. And when Sister White refers Christ more than as a message. So in that sense, the reign of the temple from 1989 is compressing the development of a prophetic message. Begins to be unsealed at the temple.
Did we hear that? Louder, my brother, repeat yourself.
There won't be.
Yeah. So everyone can hear you.
I'm saying Christ compares himself with a temple, but Sister White in a number of illustrations, this Christ also has a prophetic message. Because, for example, he said that those who rejected the message of Christ did not receive the message of John the Baptist. So, therefore, the reign of the temple from the time of the early illustrates a progressive development of a prophetic message that begins to be unsealed from the time of the end. That's how I understand it.
As I understand it. And he's correct. When you look at the rearing of the temple, we're saying that this movement that is being organized, it's organized to do what? To give a message. So as you're seeing this movement being organized, you're also seeing a message that is being developed, right? And as you can identify the beginning of this movement of organization taking place from at the time of the end, you can also trace the development of this message from the time of the end. And what were the stages in the development of this message? What stages did we identify? What stages did we identify in the development of the message, as illustrated by the building of the temple? Yes, remember the same, the stones cut out of the quarry, right? And what do those stones represent? The what? Messages, the principles, concepts, and themes, right? That are used to do what? To lay the foundation. And so, what is the next step? So the stones are cut out of the quarry, then what happens? The foundation is being laid. And we talked about the truths that are the foundation, right? As they were laid out from essentially 2004 to 2012. So 2004 to 2014. Where did we leave off at the close of our study yesterday? What were we seeking to put in place yesterday? Because we moved past the foundation and we're talking about, I think we laid down the entire history of the construction of Solomon's temple. stones cut out in 1989. Then we have 9/11. Were the foundations put in place? Came to the prediction before midnight. Then we came to midnight. So we're saying the temple is complete at the prediction before midnight, before midnight. Can we lay out the arguments we put in place to establish this point? Why are we saying the temple is complete here? If someone would mind sharing what they remember, what they have from their notes. Why are we saying the temple is finished when we arrive at this waymark? Repeat the question. Hang on, we'll come to you. Any thoughts? We're all here yesterday. Why are we saying the temple is finished when we arrive at the prediction before midnight? And we drew some arguments from the symbolic significance of some of the dates and the numbers and the years in connection with the construction of the temple. Yes, my brother.
The 11th year of Solomon, and then we also spoke about the 11 centuries. In 2015, Judas, the around from England.
You said the 11th year of?
Solomon. Oh,
It was the 12th year of Solomon's reign, that the temple was finished.
I think it was finished in the 11th and then finished in the 12th.
Yes, my brother is saying the temple is finished in what year?
The 11th and then finished in the 12th.
The 11th year. Dedicated in the following year, how many months later?
11 months.
11 months later. So it's finished in the 11th year, and the dedication was 11 months later. Temple's finished in the 11th year. What month was it finished in?
The 8th month.
8th month, which is? And what month was it dedicated?
7.
What does all this mean? Eighth month, temple finished in the 11th year, the number 12, 7th month. What does this all mean? What do we say yesterday? If we're taking notes, it's always good to take notes because I don't know about you, but so much information is given in studies that you won't remember it all. I won't remember it all. I have to take notes. So if you look at your notes, what did we say all this meant? Someone wants to share.
I was not there, but 8 is a symbol. We have circumcision on the 8th day, and the 11th it also can symbolize the 11 disciples, the fall of Judas. The 7th month is the month wherein we have like judgment. I was not there, so don't ask me.
Okay, that's okay. Someone who was there. Yes, Mr. Martin.
The bull is flower. Means flower.
Bull means flowering. And what is that? Yeah.
You know that what causes flowering is the rain.
Uh,
Then we come to, and we have the permanent fruit.
Okay, so the month bull, it means flowering, right? Or produce. And we're contrasting this with what? What causes the plants to flower and develop produce? The rain. And we saw that there is a rain that is given here in the month Ziv, right? And which rain is this? An early rain. But at the end of the okay, well anyway, here bull means the rain that is given here at the prediction before midnight. This is the latter rain. So we're seeing early rain and latter rain. So what is this telling us? What is it saying for us right now? That we're under the latter rain. And what does the latter rain do? It ripens. It ripens the harvest and prepares it for the sickle. Right? When does the latter rain come? Yes, my sister? When does the latter rain come? Towards the close of the harvest. So what is this telling us about the history of the priests? Where are we in our timeline in the history of the priests? We're approaching the end of our probationary time, because the harvest is the close of probation. We covered that yesterday. Okay, so the number 11. What is the symbolic significance of the number 11 in relation to the prediction before midnight? Yeah, what's your answer?
So, number 11 is when the disciples were the 11 disciples in the upper chamber doing the placement.
Okay, you have 11 disciples in the upper room.
Yes.
So what are you saying? The upper room is...
It's prediction before midnight, because the upper room represents prediction before midnight to midnight is Pentecost for us. It represents activities of the upper room for us.
Okay, so there were 11 disciples in the upper room, and the upper room is the prediction before midnight. And we laid down arguments for saying, for why, right? We talked about how Christ fed them, he washed the disciples' feet, he clarified the gospel message, he gave an increase of knowledge on Daniel 11:40-45, which is which we connected with the latter rain, and it's at this point that Judas leaves, leaving only 11 disciples. And we've spoken about how we've been under this development really since 2014, when the falling away is taking place. Judas is leaving. The number 12, what's the number 12 represent? What did we say? Organization. This process of organization that began here, or really what we could say it began here, when we come to prediction before midnight, this process is complete. Then the temple is dedicated in this time period from prediction before midnight to midnight. And of course, there's more to be understood regarding what exactly this means. But is this final preparatory period for the wise priests, for them to be able to come to midnight and to be prepared for the experience and the work that they must engage in at this point. I think that was as far as we got. How long did it take to build the temple? 7 years. number 7 represents? Completeness or perfection. Right? That there's a perfect work of organization. This organization that is being set up is perfect from its inception through to its completion. The prediction before me. I'll just add in some of the points that we shared yesterday. In this time period, we said there was noise. And we saw that noise is a prophetic symbol of? Of what? Message shaking, but of what time period? The issue of the first angel, according to Ezekiel 37, the first prophesying produces the noise. Then you have the second prophesying. But when we look at Solomon, when he was building the temple here, there was no noise. Right? And no noise is? What's not the word for no noise? Silence. And what happens when there's silence in heaven? What does that symbolize? Change of dispensation. What dispensation change do we see here? Right, we mark judgment of the dead to judgment of the living. Okay, so if we continue with your notes, we're just going to close off our consideration of Solomon's temple. We saw that the dedication, if we come to page 16 and 17, that's what we'll be reading if you hold those pages. How long was the dedicatory service? 14 days, right? And the 14th day brings you to midnight, we said, right? And what did we say about the number 14? How did we establish that the number 14 is a symbol of midnight? Yes?
On the 14th day of the first Mass, Passover was celebrated, and the Passover did occur at midnight.
Alright. Passover was celebrated on the 14th day of the first month. And Passover can be connected to midnight because the very first Passover in Exodus, the death angel passed over Egypt at midnight. So we have that connection there. And then we started looking at the symbolic significance of the number 14. We saw that from Abraham to David are how many generations? 14 generations. So David is marking the 14th generation. And what did we say? What did we say David symbolized? I heard it. The covenant, right? And from David to the carrying away to Babylon are 14 generations, and the captivity took place in the 14th generation. What is the captivity symbolizing? The persecution that begins in earnest at midnight. And from the carrying away to Christ are 14 generations. And Christ, what did we say about Christ?
Yeah.
He was what?
Yeah.
Mari vision. What does that mean?
Yeah.
The appearance? Okay. That's theological talk. What does it mean? Lifted up, yes, correct. My brother, elaborate. Mari, what does that mean? You said it. Mari, what does it mean? It means the appearance, but what does that mean?
We saw that Christ does not come literally, but Christ comes in form of messages.
Alright, so there's a message coming here. What type of message? What type of message? So this message that comes in. What type of message? Well, what type of message came here?
It's not as a personage.
In what form did he come to us here?
The form of the angel of Revelation.
In the form of the angel of Revelation 18. Right? And what did the angel of Revelation 18 unseal to us? A prophetic message, was it not?
Yes.
Right. So, how is Christ coming to us here at midnight in the Mari vision? In the form of a prophetic message, right? And what does this prophetic message do for God's people at this Waymark?
Lifted. Lifts them.
They're what?
They're lifted.
Yes, they go through an experience, they're lifted up, then they're prepared to do a work. Right? They're given a work to do and they're strengthened to, as Daniel was touched 3 times, right? He is strengthened and then he's given a message and a work to do. Right? So you have there the Mari vision. And what is the work to be done by the priests in this time period from midnight onwards? It's the work of calling out the Levites. Okay. There's another passage I wanted us to read in connection with the number 14. It's in 2 Kings 18, verses 13 to 16. And I'd like us to think about this because I don't have an answer for it. It says, now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. So what do we see in the 14th generation?
Captivity.
We have the king of Assyria, who is the king of the
North.
king of the north. And he's coming up against all the fenced cities of Judah and taking them. Then it says, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria, Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me that which thou puttest on me, I will bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver, and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house. At that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord, and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. So we see the king of the north comes, he besieges Judah, and the king of Judah, what does he do? He takes the gold and the silver from the temple, and he gives it to the king of Assyria, right? And this is taking place at midnight. Okay, so what does that mean? What is that representing symbolically? Let's think about that and we'll come back to it. I see we're not too keen on engaging in a dialogue, so beg your pardon? You're meditating. Okay. It's okay to interact like this. I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable. You know, it's okay to have a dialogue, interact about prophetic concepts. It's how we learn. And my objective is not just to lecture. My objective is to help us to learn. And if we can come away having clearly learned a few things, then that's a blessing. So, whatever this passage is bringing to view, it's bringing to view developments that take place here at midnight. And I think there's more to be gleaned, but maybe we can revisit it once we've had some time to think about it. What else did we lay out yesterday? We said that the dedicatory service took place, and then what happened when the ark was brought into the temple?
The glory of the Lord
God's glory filled the temple. And what did that, and what happened? God's glory filled the temple, and the priest couldn't minister. And what does it mean when a priest can't minister? Probation closed, because a priest is ministering, making intercession for the sins of God's people. And if you can't enter the temple to make intercession, then it means there's probation's closed. And we mark that, if we're going to identify it as a point in time, we mark that at midnight. So we left off looking at 2 Chronicles 5 verses 1 to 14. And it says, all the men gathered themselves to the temple dedication in the 7th month. And what do we say the 7th month is? The feast of, well, the feast in the 7th month, the Feast of Tabernacles, we said, right? And let's read from verse 11. It says, and it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place, for all the priests that were present were sanctified. Right. So this is in the time period of the dedication, from prediction before midnight to midnight. And this, we're told, is the Feast of Tabernacles. And we said the Feast of Tabernacles was celebrating the end of the harvest, showing us that by this time period, by the time at prediction before midnight, the harvest is essentially complete. You have the tares have been bound off, right? And you have the people that God is going to use at midnight to give the call to come out of Adventism. Right, so you have the end of the harvest, but we also see, it says as we read there, that all the priests were sanctified, and how many priests were there? Verse 12, it says, also the Levites, which were all singers, all of them of Asaph, of the man of Jeduthun, with their sons and their brethren, being arrayed in white linen, having cymbals and psalteries and harps, stood at the east end of the altar, and with them 120 priests sounding with trumpets. So there are 120 priests. The number 120 is a multiple of the number 12. So it's also conveying this truth that this process of organization is complete by the time you come to this time period from prediction before midnight to midnight. And it says, and it came to pass, even as the trumpeters and singers were as one, to make one sound to be heard in praising and thanking the Lord. And when they lifted up their voice with the trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music, and praised the Lord, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever, then the house was filled with a cloud, even the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister by reason of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. So we see here, the priests and the singers are as one. God's people are perfectly united. And they lift up their voice, they give a cry, right? So we've marked that the Pentecost, the midnight cry message is put in place here before being proclaimed at the subsequent Weimar. Okay, so I think those are all the points we're looking to make in connection with Solomon's temple. And we're about to turn to consider the second temple. The second temple, which you find on page 18 of your notes. the Second Temple, page 18. So the temple, the Second Temple was built after the captivity, and was built over the history of how many kings? 7, right? And who are these 7 kings? We have Cyrus was the first. Cyrus was followed by Cambyses, his son. Cambyses was followed by Ptolemy. And Ptolemy was followed by? Who? And Darius was followed by? Xerxes and? And then? Okay, so we have 7 kings. And these 7 kings are identifying the beginning of the 2300 days. Right, so when we look at the 2300 days, we have 7 kings that bring you to the 3rd decree in 457, right? And when we come to the end of the 2300 days, what can we see? We have 7 thunders. Delineation of events, and you can identify how each of these kings parallel the events of the 7 thunders. How many? We have 3 decrees also being passed over the history of these kings. Cyrus passed the first decree. Decrees are typifying the 3 angels' messages, right? We have 3 decrees here, and we have 3 angels' messages here. So we see that the beginning of the 2300 days parallels the end of the 2300 days. But now when we look at this history of the 3 decrees, in this time period, the temple and the city of Jerusalem were rebuilt. Right, so now when we look at the history of these decrees, if you look in your notes on page 18, we understand that the construction of the temple began in the time of Cyrus. And Cyrus passed the first decree. And the first decree is typifying the first angel's message. Right? So the construction of the temple begins in the time period of the first angel. And that is the point that we're making here, where although the temple begins to go up in earnest in the history of the second angel, where we see the foundation being laid and the walls going up, you can't separate this work from the work that was done prior to in gathering the stones to build the temple. So this line is clearly teaching us that the construction of the temple begins in the history of the first angel, which for us is the history of 1989 to 9/11. But when we look at Darius, Darius passed the second decree. And it was in his time period that the construction of the temple was finished. Darius completed the construction of the temple. So what is that telling us? It is another witness to the point already made in the history of the Temple of Solomon, that the temple is finished in the history of the second angel. So there are passages in your notes on page 18. There's a passage there from, at the bottom of the page, CRBJ, page 41. So that's from J.N. Andrews, his book, Command to Rebuild and Restore Jerusalem, page 41. It says, the work thus decreed by Cyrus, being only fairly begun in his lifetime, was forcibly hindered during the reigns of the next two kings. Then Darius, to whom the whole matter was referred, issued his decree, repeating word for word a large part of the decree of Cyrus, and adding largely to its grant of power. Thus the decree of Darius inseparably united with that of Cyrus. Under these connected acts, the temple was builded and finished as a structure, but was not beautified and adorned, and Jerusalem itself, as we may conclude from the facts named, though having no legal existence, had to some extent sprung up into existence around the temple. Now Artaxerxes takes up and endorses all that had been done by Cyrus and Darius, for he greatly beautified and adorned the temple that had been erected under their decrees, finishing it a second time when it had been finished in a plain manner before by Darius. Alright, and the next passage, this is from Uriah Smith's book, Lifting Up Jesus, page 79. It says, 42,360 persons, enough to people quite a respectable city, returned under the proclamation of Cyrus to the site of Jerusalem to rebuild the house of the Lord. And the sacred vessels which had been taken away were also restored. 52 years after the complete destruction of the first temple, the foundation of the second was laid by Zerubbabel. The prophets Haggai and Zechariah encouraged the builders. Hindered 15 years through the influence of the Samaritans and others, it was at length finished and dedicated in the 6th year of Darius Hystaspes, BC 515, 21 years after its commencement. Right, so these two passages are telling us the temple was finished in the history of Darius, but Uriah Smith identifies two prophets that were prophesying in this time period. There's Haggai and Zechariah. Right, Haggai and Zechariah, that wasn't the point I was looking for. The reformer raised up was Zerubbabel, who laid the foundation. And Zerubbabel means what? From Babylon. So he's a symbol of the second angel. He's a symbol of the second angel, which gives a call to come out of Babylon. And Zerubbabel both laid the foundation and he finished the temple. Just as Solomon laid the foundation and he finished the temple. Let's read this in Zechariah 4 verses 8 to 10. Zechariah 4 verses 8 to 10. And it says, Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands also shall finish it. And thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. With those seven, they are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth. So, okay, the temple is finished in the history of the second angel. This work of organization is complete prior to midnight, which for the priests is the third step, as we've understood. Let's read on to Ezra 6, verses 14 to 17. Ezra 6, verses 14 to 17. And it says, and the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity, kept the dedication of this house of God with joy, and offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Israel, 12 he-goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. Okay, so the temple is finished in the 6th year of Darius on the 3rd day of the month Adar, and the month Adar is the 12th month. So the temple was finished on the 3rd day. On the 3rd day of the 12th month. And this is significant because we have the number 3 and the number 12. The number 3 is identifying.
Third angel.
Are you what?
Third angel.
Third angel. Right, so we have the number 3 identifying the arrival of the third angel, and the number 12, as you already said,
Organization.
the organization that is going to give the third angel's message is established on the 3rd day of the 12th month, as the temple was completed at that time. And of course, this is the dedication. It's dedicated. And how many years did it take to construct in total? It took 21 years. Okay, let's continue on with Ezra 6, verses 18 to 22. Ezra 6, verses 18 to 22. It says, and they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their courses for the service of God, which is at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. And the children of the captivity kept the Passover upon the 14th day of the 1st month. For the priests and the Levites were purified together. All of them were pure, and killed the Passover for all the children of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests, and for themselves. And the children of Israel, which were come again out of captivity, and all such as had separated themselves unto them from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, to seek the Lord God of Israel, did eat. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days, with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful, and turned the heart of the king of Assyria unto them, to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God. So we have a Passover being kept. At the end of the temple, after the temple was dedicated, 1 month and 11 days actually after the temple was dedicated. But we've already seen from the previous temple, identified all the symbolism of the Passover in connection with midnight. And it's no coincidence that both these temples, at the end, they're both, we see the Passover being celebrated at the end of the construction of both of them. So in your notes there it says Passover is a symbol of midnight, as we've said. At the Passover midnight, those ministering the temple are pure. As it says, the Levites and the priests were gathered together and all of them were pure. So this purification process has come to its to its culmination, to its end. And all such as have separated themselves, I'm saying this is identifying the experience of the second angel. Those who have foolish virgins, they're the ones who engage in this Passover celebration that we're marking at midnight. And we can continue. But I think we will pause there today. We'll close off our study, and tomorrow we'll recap, and we will continue our consideration of the construction of Solomon's, of the second temple, because there are more points we need to put in place. Let's close. Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. We thank you for what we've been able to cover. Help us, dear Lord, to not only to understand, but to internalize these solemn and important truths, to make them our own. Dear Father, give us clearness of mind, give us energy, give us concentration to be able to do the work that we must do over the course of this camp, of taking information to carry home to our respective localities, and to reconsider, review, and to make our own. We thank you for bringing us to the end of yet another day. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.